Good afternoon. Welcome to today's and this week's short lunchtime talk from Worcestershire Archive and Archaeology Service. My name's Paul. I'm Learning and Outreach Manager for the Archive and Archaeology Service. And for those who haven't joined us before, some of the talks are of general interest, such as our Worcestershire Treasures talks, whilst others are aimed at individuals and groups who are looking at maybe starting or restarting projects and research, and letting them know about the ways that you can use our resources, what we have that can help. We know that lots of groups have had to, for obvious reasons, but lots of things on hold over the past year. But you may well be thinking, well, how about in the autumn? Maybe looking at doing new projects, getting things started again. And so some of the talks that we have are aimed at that. And although we're doing them on YouTube Live, they will be recorded and available afterwards on YouTube to catch up with. So today's is researching buildings as part of projects. We have lots of people who come and use us for researching buildings, whether these are people's personal homes, public buildings, or a wider number of houses or homes. And it has been increasingly popular over the years. Family history is always popular, but people have also been attracted more and more to tracing the history of houses and of buildings and looking at those. Um, and as part of that, also various groups have that as one part of their focus and coming in when they're doing research and coming in and seeing us. And for some of these, it may be that it is the main focus of a project. It may be or the research side of it is anyway. For instance, as part of a funding bid to restore a building such as a church, then public engagement and researching the building, which may help with some of the restoration, may help with interpretation, exhibitions, books, websites, things like that, adding to that particular project. It could be part of that. The image that we have is of St Egwin's Roman Catholic Church in Evesham. We recently did some house history, building history workshops as part of that project. As part of that, it's the restoration part, and then the public engagement bit was getting more people involved. Or it may be that the project is researching the key buildings of houses in an area. I know a number like that, particularly around the millennium. I know that there was a few villages and communities around who published books, basically giving a brief history of all the houses in their area, or most of them, and often getting local people involved in researching their own houses. Some of that can depend on how big your area is, but I know a few times where they're trying to get as many things as possible to show the development of an area, and so sometimes that can be the focus, or quite often it can be part of a wider one. So it's the history of the village, the history of that part of the town, and as part of that, they want to pick out some of the key buildings or houses within those to talk about and to have as one strand, as well as doing other parts of the history of that area, or maybe particular types of public buildings within a stream. There's the schools, churches, police stations, um, all sorts of different options. And as part of projects as well, sometimes it's one way of getting people involved and doing research, passing on skills, getting them involved. So looking at trying to do a local history project, and this is one way of getting people involved and something that's personal to them, because it may be the house that they're living in, or else it's a building that they are connected with. So, as well as individuals coming in and doing it for their own purpose, quite a few groups at least consider or come in and do research with the buildings as part of wider things, or they're needing to get things ready for a project and need to find out more about that building. So today I'm just talking about some of the resources we have and some of the things you might want to bear in mind, and they would be love to chat to you at some time about, if you think about doing that, of what your ideas are. As a slight adjacent thing, to mention that we also offer professional building recording. Within our archaeology service, we have specially trained staff who can carry out building recording. This may be quite often as part of the planning process, where as part of redevelopment and things like that. A professional report needs to be written, and so we can come out and do that, and sometimes that might be part of a project, whereas people will then carry out their own research and we provide the professional services. We can also carry out research as well. However, often that's one of the things that people want to have a go at. That's the of getting people involved and having a go themselves. But that option does go alongside, because sometimes we do get asked about the more technical aspects of buildings, and so that can be sometimes alongside where volunteers get involved. The image shows a 3D reconstruction of Willow Court Farm, where we did quite a bit of work. That's the story of that is on our blog. That's been restored by the Worcestershire Historic Buildings Trust, and as part of that we went out and did recording and did some research. Some of the other work that's done at the top, King's Head, Monmouth, a Wetherspoons pub, where we helped uncover wall paintings that dated back to around 1600, and the two images below are of Baddesley Clinton National Trust property, where we did again some work for them, and looking at some of the beams and putting together the story of that building. I've also been doing work at St Swithin's here in Worcester as well, alongside the redevelopment work there, keeping on things and recording as they go along. But the main thing is, of course, is your own research is probably why you'd be interested in that, of doing it as much as you can yourself. And so just one or two things to bear in mind with carrying out your own research. Depending on what it is, it can be a little bit tricky. And a similar procedure to family history, and lots of people have done some family history, and some of the sources are similar, some of the principles are similar, starting with what you know and working back. The records with buildings are a bit more hit and miss. So it can be a little bit more of variable as to what you might find. However, people do enjoy it. It is rewarding, and people do want to have a go and see what you can find. And lots of projects that we've known people do this in have found all sorts of information about the houses, buildings that they've been looking into. If you're doing it as part of a project and getting a number of people involved, perhaps looking at several buildings or houses, always think about coordination. Who's going to bring the research together, chivvy people along, provide support, and then bring that together for the final output, whether it's a report, website, presentation, however that's going to be going along, and giving a bit of support to people if they're kind of, oh, I've got this far, where do I go next? What else can I do? And as with anything with house history, thinking, why would it be recorded? Is it special? Does it have a particular use? Was it owned by an estate organisation? Which may depend on where you might want to look for information about it. All the houses, buildings are separate, and you think about why would it be recorded, which is all. Anytime anybody wants to do house history, that's one of the key things. Why would it be recorded? And if we mention, and if I'd say today, the phrase ordinary building or ordinary house, it's not a derogatory term. I live in an ordinary house. It's just thinking, is it something that's going to really stand out to the crowd? Or is it going to be something that it's similar to lots of other ones? It's a terraced house, but still has a story to tell, still has something to contribute, but it might be having to look a little bit different, and thinking again of why would it be recorded? Where do you look? Always start locally, have a chat to local people, local residents, local historians, local societies. Is there anybody who might have already started recording things and know all sorts of information that would be extremely valuable? Local museums and libraries, and of course ourselves, Archive and Archaeology Service, the resources publicly available in the Hive. Because at the moment it's a little bit different. Hopefully soon we can get back to normal. But within the archives, the local studies library, the historic environment record of coming to have a look and to see what you can find. always have to try to remember that the Worcester City Historic Environment Record is separate, so you can contact Sheena, who looks after that for anything in Worcester City. We have the HR for the rest of the county, all around Worcester, but they have their own, although we do work very closely together. And also, if you're on the edge of the county, think about the geographical boundaries. For instance, speaking to people in Tenbury who were doing house history, and they were saying that they were having to go to Hereford, Shrewsbury, or Worcester, depending on what they were looking at. The building didn't move, but for various reasons, the administrative boundaries over time would move. And so that's always worth bearing in mind as well, depending on where it is. So I'm going to go through very quickly some of the resources and things that we have. I can do a 3-hour workshop all about house history and getting people involved and looking at things. But we also, so I just need to give you a little bit of taste to hear the sort of things, just to show the things that how much we have. As I said, it's split between the original archives, 12 miles of shelving of documents going back 900 years, our self-service area, which includes microfilms, and also our local studies library and the historic environment record. One thing often to start with are the books. There are some fantastic books about house and building history that will take you in detail all about the different sources and information and guiding there. General histories around the county and architectural ones and local history books. This is particularly if it's a sort of building that is going to be recorded, if it's a very old house or it has a particular purpose, thinking, is it going to be included within these? So the project I was mentioning about St Egwin's in Evesham, yeah, there's quite a few books about Evesham that it's going to be mentioned in, so it's worth looking at what is already known. Some of it may not be accurate, but it may sort of guide you, at least it's somewhere to start off with. I said all sorts of different sources having to skim over. One of the other main ones that you often start off with are maps. We have loads of maps. Ordnance Survey, which starts 1880 onwards, very, very detailed maps. You see all the individual houses, the property, the boundaries, and key information. And then as the different editions of every few years, you can see how a building develops and the plot, which can explain why a building is shaped how it is. Manuscript maps. These are ones, pardon me, that might not quite be one-offs, but they're hand created and they're very limited edition done for a specific purpose. Tithe and enclosure maps from the 19th century, some of the most obvious ones that will take you a bit back further than Ordnance Survey. And estate maps created for somebody who owns a large estate and they want their lands mapped. And so houses aren't necessarily the key purpose of this of the maps, but often they'll show them in the outline, and that can help track back on there. And numerous other maps to produce for all sorts of purposes, boundary maps, and different other ones for planning purposes that may have information that helps you go back and see when does building appear, what does it look like. A few images of some of the maps. If this was one of our workshops, I'd be getting some of the maps out to have a look at and start comparing to see what we can gather from there. Ordnance Survey in the top left-hand corner, as I said, the individual properties are shown. Below that is an Ordnance Survey map, but it's part of the 1909 Finance Act maps that actually says who owns particular pieces of land. Bottom right, a less detailed Ordnance Survey map seeing a wider area, and the top right is an estate map showing the particular land that somebody has owned. And those are often a key part of getting started with building history, tracking it back visually. Mid 18th century map of the Claines parish drawn by John Docherty. Maps in the past are done in different ways. This one shows side-on views or at an angle of houses here in Claines, just off Northwick are the ones that are on the screen. And for some of these, it will say who owns or who rents particular property, which is also always useful as well. Very few sources say that, but these and tithe and enclosure maps are some of the ones that can sometimes give us that information. Other sources, and often I split sources into ones about the buildings themselves and about the people who owned or inhabited them or connected. And for buildings, all sorts of ones. Sales catalogues, building plans from the late 19th century onwards, photographs, plans, deeds, valuations, and surveys. As I said, it may depend on the particular type of building as to what there is. And this is um, a building plan for the old rectifying house on North Parade, Worcester, which is still there as a pub. And within our collections of building plans, we have that. So if you come across ones like that, absolutely goldmine, because it will give a load of detail about how it was originally built and all sorts of things like that. Bottom is a photograph of a terraced house. As I said, we don't have many of those, but you can occasionally strike it lucky. Top right, part of a sales catalogue. Note those normally ones that would particularly stand out, that would be worth having a sales catalogue produced and kept. Part of a plan as part of a deed in the top left-hand corner. We have very few deeds, mostly it wouldn't be ones that would kept, but we do have lots. It's a drop in the ocean. And those gives a plan about, in this case, a pub in Kidderminster, the layout. So yeah, just a couple of other images of St Egwin's. Again, churches, really old or significant buildings are the ones that you are more likely to get, although St Egwin's we had far fewer than I thought. Great Malvern Railway Station, again a prominent building, so more likely to have photographs, whereas other places, sometimes you can be surprised that some places you might not have some, other ones can be surprised when that we do have images. Then also think about what sources are there for telling about the people connected. Now, sometimes you have it just because people bring a house alive or a building alive. People are connected. You can find out about them. So who were these people? What were their lives? What were their jobs? What was their story? If anybody saw the program, there's been 3 series about a house through time. It's the stories of the people often that captures the imagination. But also it can be helpful for identifying a building. I've known people who end up doing a wider project of farms in a particular parish because they're trying to trace their farm, but because the farm keeps changing its name, it's hard to work out which is which. So they're doing a wider project. So working out, well, who's at which one at different dates, because if the people are staying in the same one, that will help identify which one, particularly when house numbers can change and things like that, or house building can change. The people can help identify which is the one you're talking about. And so this can include things like the census for 1841 to 1911, trade directories, wills, and various other sources. Once you've got names about people connected, what else can you find out about these people that will potentially might help tell about all sorts of other ones as well? We're slightly out of order, I realised. The historic environment record, which I mentioned at the start, is an important source but often underused. It's a GIS database, which means it's map based, which means that when you're able to come in and sit next to an archaeologist, at the moment it's by appointment only, 24 hours in advance, you can point to a computer on the map that's on the computer, say, what have you got about that? And we can zoom in and try and find out what we have, bring up old maps that we have digitized on there, and they'll have listed buildings, archaeological sites, maps, archaeology reports, find spots. So if it's a historic building, we may well have details about that. We can check to see. I said often people may not be as aware of the HER, so we always encourage people to get in touch and to see what might be able to help. And as I mentioned at the start, the Worcester City one is separate, although we do work closely together, and Sheena looks after that, so you can get in contact with her to find out what they have about particular buildings if it's Worcester that you're interested in. And so yeah, for St Egwin's, there's an entry, unsurprisingly, because it's a significant building, listed building, built by one of the Pugins. There is a very basic version online on Heritage Gateway website, although the full details you need to contact us for, or Malvern Railway Station, various details. It often works like a bibliography as well. So it will guide you where else to look. What other photographs, reports do we have? Is it mentioned in the Victoria County history? Things like that. Um, so back to people. Um, as I said, they bring the people, bring houses to life, and it can help work out things. And other people may not be living in public buildings. Who's the station master at the at the Great Malvern Railway Station? Who is the priest at St Egwin's? I have a question here. Is there any information on when street numbering changed? Um, I don't know exactly. It might differ. I know at Lick Street it was the early 20th century, because when the excavations were taking place at the Cathedral Roundabout, um, we did all sorts of research about Lick Street, and we realised that a couple of us were speaking at cross purposes, because around about 1904, 1905, and before, they basically went up one side and down the other. Then around about 1906, 1907, it went to opposite sides of the road, which is mostly what you get today. But we didn't realise, so we're saying, no, no, such and such lived there. No, no, they lived here. So you sometimes just have to beware of that. So I don't know whether there was a standard date when they changed, but certainly Lick Street and one or two other places, it's the early 20th century when they seem to have decided to change to accommodate. If you could extend a street, you can just add those on at the end. So that normally is the reason that they do it, and for consistency. But I don't know whether it's the same everywhere. Sorry, my speaker just made a little noise. So other things you say, for instance, the census for St Egwin's, they looked at the priest, and his details, Robert Patton, and information about him to add to it. But you can do it for who's living in a particular house over time. For that project, we looked in the trade directories to find out about the priest and any other information that we can find out about. We managed to find the details of his will, the first priest at the new church. Um, Online, you can find some of the records for the indexes, and before 1928, we've got a copy of Worcestershire wills to find out what they do. And in one case, with an example that we sometimes use in one of our workshops, we managed to find the will of the person who owned the houses, and actually mentioned them within the wills, saying that they were passing on to his sons, and the value of them, which were very useful. And newspapers, I said, for the church, managed to find mentions of that. Is a is a is your building or house going to be mentioned again? You have to think about yourself about how likely or not it is. We have newspapers, although for text searching you'd need to subscribe to one of those websites. So those are just a few of the sources that we have. As I said, our normal workshop lasts 3 hours, in which we do get sources out and people can have a good rummage and have a look and see what they can find on maps and things like that. And we often also do a 1 hour introduction to just pointing out where things are in the search room as well for buildings. So normally, and hopefully that'll be soon, archives are open 5 days a week. At the moment, it's just 3 days a week, bookable a week in advance. Self-service would normally be open anytime the building is open. At the moment, it's closed at the moment. And the historic environment record is normally Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons, but at the moment you need to book 24 hours in advance. And you can also use our indexes and catalogues that are online. It's not fully comprehensive. There are some that you need to come in for. So how can we help? If you're thinking of doing a project looking at building history, house history, for all of the purposes I mentioned at the start, of having that as your focus, then yeah, we're a fantastic place to come to, as long as you're Worcestershire connected. And you can come and research. So particularly once restrictions have eased, as we're hoping that they will do very soon, anytime, just come along as with any other member of the public and use the resources that we've got here. Um, come along when we manage to restart our workshops, and we'll have our house history workshop starting again. Come along to that and find out more about what we can offer and how to go around it, and get more details about different sources that I've been mentioning. We can also run the workshops, introductions and tours for groups, depending on what you're wanting, how much information you're needing. Sometimes it's just the basic, just pointing out where things are and people are happy getting going. Sometimes people have asked for the house history workshop just for them, or on maps or something else where I said, actually, this would be really good for our group. Can you do that? And we can do something bespoke. There will be a charge for that because we need to charge for our time for outreach activity. But if you put getting in funding, things like that, that can be built in. There are some professional services, as I mentioned, with our archaeology colleagues, with building recording, things like that, with our buildings experts. Again, there is a charge for that, but if you're interested in that, please get in touch. Um, we also have our digitisation service. So if you're wanting really high quality copies of photographs and documents and things for exhibitions, websites and things as part of your output, then we're able to do that and to provide those for a fee. And also group permits in the search room. So if you're taking copies in the archive search room, normally most people do it on a camera or a phone, just for note-taking purposes, and you need to get a permit to do that and sign information about copyright. But because often there's groups are doing things together, you can also get a group permit, and we just put the names of all the different people as part of the group, and then we can keep that, and people can take the copies as they go along. And please feel free to chat to us if you're thinking about doing a project like this. Ask us, and we're quite happy to pass on our experience and explain about what other groups have done, some suggestions about sources and things like that. We're quite happy to give a chat and hopefully sort of guide you and point you in the right direction. Um, so yeah, as with any project, think about that. Please get in touch. We're happy to help. It's great to see people coming in doing their own research as part of a wider one that will help contribute towards uh, further studies, further knowledge, and enabling that. I said buildings and houses are increasingly popular for looking at, have all sorts of stories, whether it's the buildings themselves, the people, or a combination of those. So yeah, if any questions, please get in touch with us. Explore the past at worcestershire.gov.uk. I will be happy to chat through. So thank you for joining us. As I said, it is a very quick whistle-stop tour, as all these ones are, because they're a short lunchtime talk. Next week, join us at 1 o'clock, and I'll be talking about May celebrations. So with May Day, 2 bank holidays, Whitsuntide, it was traditionally a month with lots of different activities, lots of celebrations, and we've delved into the archives in the past to look at what they say. And so if you join us next week, we'll be happy to share some of the stories that we've discovered. So thank you for joining us. Bye.